Hi everyone and welcome to Bonnie Astrology. Today I'm going to be discussing the final full moon of 2024, which is happening on Sunday the 15th of December, and of course what it means for your zodiac sign. As always, if you do enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for regular astrology content from me, and if you want more regular updates you can follow me on my Instagram, which is listed in the description. And if you do want to book a private reading with me to see what 2025 has in store for you, the link to my website is also listed in the description. But first I'm going to be getting into what this full moon means for all of us collectively, the different themes that are coming up for this final full moon of 2024. You can click ahead to your zodiac sign. The timestamps are listed below in the description as well, but if you want to listen to what this means for all of us collectively, feel free to do so. I do suggest when you click ahead to your horoscope you go for your rising sign for the most accurate astrology predictions, but you can watch your sun and your moon for more additional information. So firstly, a few facts about this full moon. It is the final full moon of 2024 and it's going to be happening on Sunday the 15th of December, and we tend to feel the effects of a full moon in the 3 days prior or the 3 days after, but they can be felt up to a week either end of the full moon itself. And this one is going to be happening at 23 degrees of Gemini. Now if you look to your natal chart and you see that you have any factors at 23 degrees of Gemini in particular, but also in Sagittarius, Virgo or Pisces, you may be feeling this full moon that little bit more emotionally than others. And that is because when a full moon affects our natal chart directly, we tend to feel it. It's usually more impactful, and it usually represents some sort of culmination of feelings. So if you don't have anything at those factors, you may not necessarily be feeling this full moon as strongly as other people, or it may not necessarily coincide with impactful events in your everyday life, but you're likely still going to be feeling some of the themes that are coming up in the house that it falls in. Now, this full moon is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury has been retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius, and it just so happens that Mercury is stationing direct the day of this full moon, and that makes the themes of Mercury retrograde that little bit more impactful. We tend to notice that Mercury retrograde themes such as miscommunication, misunderstandings, commute trouble, whether that's your car or public service, trains, buses, that sort of thing, technology as well, they tend to experience some frustrating energy on the day that Mercury stations either retrograde or direct. So you may be feeling this more impactfully in the day of this full moon. Now, a full moon in general, just to touch on it, it tends to represent a culmination. It tends to represent intense emotions, completions, and emotional release. So when we have the final full moon of the year occurring, it tends to be a time where we feel very reflective on the year that's passed. And particularly in the side of Gemini, which is to do with learning, you may be reflecting on what you've learned this year. You may be reflecting on the different events that you've experienced, the way that you felt about this year, and you may be willing under this full moon to let a few things stay in 2024, to release them, to let them go, so that you can, with the next new moon, which is actually occurring on the 30th of December in the sign of Capricorn, set new intentions for yourself, set new goals. You may under this full moon become very consciously aware of what it is that you need to release in order to have a clean slate, and what about this year you would like to let go. There may be feelings that come up from prior events in the year that has just occurred that perhaps are a bit emotionally intense. You may be more in touch with your feelings. And albeit this full moon in Gemini is of course happening in an air sign, it is in a square to Neptune, which makes us more sensitive, particularly because as of the 7th of December, Neptune stationed direct. So this can be a particularly sensitive full moon. Now in the sign of Gemini, Gemini represents communication. So significant communication can occur under this full moon, whether that's receiving news via email, post, text message, seeing something on social media. But this is a beautiful time in terms of emotional release, to journal, to write in a diary, perhaps even to read old diaries. I've actually read some of my old diaries from my teenage years recently, and they're quite enlightening, I have to say, as to my mind as a teenager. But it doesn't have to be writing, or doesn't have to be reading. It can be talking to a good friend or someone that you trust to make sense of what's going on in your life. Now, the full moon in Gemini does have a co-presence with Jupiter, which is still in Gemini and will be in Gemini until the spring next year. Jupiter is in retrograde. But with Jupiter being in the sign of this full moon, it can add a sense of amplification and exaggeration to our feelings, to our emotions, and even within the sign of Gemini, to our thoughts. It can help us expand more on what we're feeling, expand more on what we're thinking, and perhaps hopefully add a sense of optimism and hope for the future, and hope that as these feelings come up, you can ground yourself in a feeling of security and hope for the future, even if you're releasing some emotions that maybe feel a bit more intense. This can also bring a sense of overstimulation, perhaps mentally. It can bring too much information, and we can be aware of the fact that maybe, you know, when we're scrolling through our phones, we're taking in an awful lot of information at once, and that can be overwhelming. Or we can watch too many, you know, when we go on a deep dive, a documentary or something like that, we can be taking in so much information that we wonder why we're feeling burnt out and anxious and stressed. And as technology advances, the mind can sometimes find it very hard to keep up with all of the information that's coming toward us. So this full moon might be a time when you want to turn off your phone for a few hours, get away from the screen for a few hours. You might become aware of how high your screen time is with a full moon in Gemini as well. Mercury stationing direct in Sagittarius can improve communication going forward. And despite the fact that this full moon itself is quite an emotional one, a sensitive one, and also a confusing one, I'll get to that, this can give us a sense of hope that clarity is coming in. We might start to feel a bit more clear on what it is that we're thinking, what we have been thinking about from the past with Mercury retrograde. It can shine a light on information that we weren't aware of had we not reflected. This full moon actually reminds me of, and this is very on point to this time of year, but Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. When he's having to go back and look at the past, he's having to look at the present, and he's having to look at the future. And in going backwards, he gets a lot more clarity on why he is the way he is, or where he made choices that he regrets. And particularly with a Mercury and Mars retrograde, we are reflective of what we have done and whether what we have done has helped or hindered ourselves. So you may be feeling a bit more reflective under this full moon, and you could have some clarity on why you did certain things, what you thought before. And you may have had what was I thinking moments, but that's a pretty good indicator that you're growing and developing mentally and spiritually if you do look back and wonder, what was I thinking? Because it shows that you have grown. So it can bring clarity and realizations we wouldn't have had we not looked back. But the full moon can amplify these themes and these emotions as it is ruled by Mercury. The square to Neptune adds a sense of confusion, and it does present opportunity for misinformation and further misunderstandings. Gemini is the sign associated with facts and information. The square to Neptune tends to confuse matters. It can bring about deceit, whether that be from others or for ourselves, a sense of delusion, and it can be a time where it's better to, with all the evidence in the world, it's better to really trust your intuition on if something feels off, it probably is. If something just seems not quite right, there may be a pretty good reason for that, even if the information that you're being presented seems to make sense. You know, Neptune transits to the moon, if you have these natally, so say for example you have any placement, you have your moon at 26, 27 of Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Gemini at the moment, you're experiencing Neptune hard aspects to your natal moon. And that can sometimes bring about people into your life who are deceitful. It can also bring about relationships or dynamics where we delude ourselves, where we don't look at the truth, where we have a rose-tinted perception, or where we're being duped by other people. So it's either that you're duping yourself or someone else is duping you. It can also be both. But it can heighten sensitivity and empathy at the time of this full moon as well. And particularly if you're getting a lot of information, you can be feeling very strong empathy for the people that you're getting information about. Neptune direct now in Pisces can bring more of a compassionate energy forward. So you can feel overwhelmed by these feelings. It can be harder as well to perceive accurately what you or other people are feeling with this full moon. The difficulty with this full moon can be hidden intentions or hidden expectations. With hard aspects from Neptune's, particularly to the moon or to the sun, it can be a time where we're experiencing a realization that people around us were expecting something that we didn't know. They can have been feeling something that they didn't express. And the illumination of this can be quite disappointing or disillusioning for us in our personal relationships. So try not to keep your expectations hidden from others. Try not to keep your hopes and aspirations hidden from other people when it comes to your relationship dynamics as well, because this can cause trouble, and it can sometimes, be where you're projecting a fantasy or someone else is projecting a fantasy, and it can reveal illusions to be a little bit more with a full moon in Gemini, it can reveal the illusions to be dishonest or honest. It just simply reveals what is, but it can feel quite confusing in the meantime. Because of the square to Neptune, our emotions and our moods can fluctuate and they can be a little bit chaotic at times. Mood swings can occur, misunderstandings, as I say, particularly with the Mercury station, are likely to occur on the day of this full moon itself. It can bring unrealistic expectations, as I also mentioned, or unrealistic or hidden intentions. Be very careful with this full moon, and I do not mean to sound doom and gloom about this. It is just something that if you're aware of it, you can exercise caution. Be very careful driving or taking journeys at the time of this full moon, because there may be drunk drivers, people driving under the influence, people driving that are sleepy at this full moon. Be very, you should not drive under the influence as it is, but be extra aware that you shouldn't do that under this full moon. And also be mindful that driving with a sense of fatigue or sleepiness can also be very dangerous under this full moon as well. Just take extra care with driving, because people can be careless on the roads with a full moon square Neptune. Just be mindful of that. You may also find that under this full moon, you're simply questioning your reality. Sometimes things can look one way and you just have a feeling that's not what it is. Or there can be hidden signs and things that make you feel a little bit like, am I reading too much into this? Is this a sign? Is this not a sign? Am I being delulu? That kind of thing. Gemini also rules the media, and the square to Neptune means that a lot of the information that is coming out at this time may be skewed. It may have an ulterior motive and it may be deceptive. I think the media nearly always has an ulterior motive at this point, but this one can be a case where there's really some very significant misinformation being put out there, and it can make you question reality a little bit. With Neptune in a hard aspect to this full moon, it may also be aware of how information is actually poisoning you and it's making you unwell. Do you know if you've ever watched a true crime documentary and you found it really interesting and you were trying to solve it, but at the crux of it all, you were getting some very horrible information and very upsetting and very distressing information, and then the next day you have a stomach ache and you wonder why you have a stomach ache, but your body is actually responding to what it is that you're taking in. And it's not about shying away from information completely, it's not about burying your head in the sand, but it's about being aware of how much information you're actually taking in, what the information is, and how this might be affecting you physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, that type of thing. Neptune squares can bring poisoning. So also be mindful under this full moon of what you're eating, drinking, ingesting, etc. It's not the best full moon to be out partying, as I said before, with the square to Neptune. You may also find that if you are at a party, people who are drunk or people who are under the influence may be sharing secrets they wish they hadn't shared. While secrets can come out that way, it can also be a case where people are saying things that are not true because they are inebriated and things like that as well. The positive thing about this full moon is that the fact that Mercury is stationing is positive, but Mercury is in a trine to Mars retrograde, where you can reflect on past actions, where you can reflect on where you could have done things better and take that information forward. Talking about past conflicts or past actions can really help you make sense of past events so that you can move forward in a way that is not clouded in an ego response. Mars retrograde in Leo means that you're reflecting on your actions and where they've come from a sense of ego, which may have been very well intentioned to keep you safe, but is actually keeping you in a sense, it's letting pride get in your way, effectively, with this Mercury-Mars trine, and looking backwards can help you to move forwards. So as always, I'm going to pull a tarot card for this full moon in Gemini. Let me know if it's hitting anything in your chart, what you're going to get up to at the time of this full moon. And let's see what the tarot message is. King of Swords. This card is haunting me. I think it's come up in quite a few readings at this point. It's come up in a few of the videos. It comes up in nearly every reading that I do. The King of Swords tends to represent, this makes perfect sense for a full moon in Gemini. This is an air person. This is someone with air placements. So an Aquarius, Libra, a Gemini figure. This to me shows that when there's information coming out, when there's going to be news, for example, it will probably point to people who are air signs, whether they be celebrities, politicians, humanitarians, any type of person that's in the public eye. Geminis, Aquarius, and Libra personalities will be front and center under this full moon in Gemini. But it can also be a time where we have to practice mental discernment, wrapping our minds in something intellectual, something that interests us, something that helps us learn will be very good for us under the full moon in Gemini. Being mindful and using your discernment of the information that you're receiving is also something that the King of Swords would do. It can also put a focus on the law, on law enforcement. But I think the essence of the King of Swords is where you either rule your mind or let your mind rule you. And that's very, potent energy under this full moon in Gemini, and something that you want to ask yourself, whether your mind is ruling you or you're ruling your mind. That's what I have for this full moon in Gemini, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye. Hi Aries, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. So Aries, it is quite likely around this time that you might be receiving news. Now, this might be news that you've been waiting on for quite a while. Maybe there's been back and forth on a decision and you're waiting to get that text, email, letter, phone call, whatever the case may be. Because this full moon is happening in your 3rd house and it's ruled by Mercury in Sagittarius. In your 9th house, Mercury is stationing direct at this full moon. So it feels as though there might be news or conversations that have been going back and forth, maybe about documentation, maybe about travel, maybe about university, college, legal affairs. It could be that perhaps you have been trying to come to some sort of conclusion about your beliefs, and it feels as though under this full moon you might be getting news, an epiphany, clarity, or having a conversation that really helps you shed some light on a matter that you've been back and forth with, or you've been waiting for, or has been delayed. Or for some of you, this could put the spotlight on your car, on a vehicle, on transport. It is likely around this time, especially in the day of the full moon, the 15th, Aries, that if you are traveling, it is entirely possible that you run into some difficulty in terms of delays, or in terms of perhaps if you're taking the bus, for example, it is delayed. There's traffic jams, roadblocks. The reason for that is when Mercury stations, it tends to amplify the Mercury retrograde the Mercury retrograde themes. Themes is what I'm looking for. So you might find if you are traveling this weekend that there is a little bit of difficulty when it comes to travel, but it could be more so, I think, for you that it's news that you're waiting on, or some kind of information that you've maybe been back and forth or waiting on. Now, I will say about this is that there could be something about it that you didn't foresee. There's a square to Neptune in your 12th, so you might be somewhat disillusioned or disappointed with it, or it might not be 100% what you thought it was going to be. It doesn't necessarily have to overtake, the helpfulness of the information, but it does seem that for a lot of you, maybe it is something that you feel, at least initially, a little bit, about. You feel a little bit disillusioned, disappointed, or maybe even in some cases outright deceived by some information that you receive with that square to Neptune. It may also be that you get information, Aries, believe it or not, you may get information in person that you saw in a dream, maybe before you receive the information. So it might be something that has a little bit of I knew this was going to happen, or I had a dream about this, or I had a premonition about this, or something of that nature as well. But I think for a lot of you, this is focusing around communication or travel. For most of you, it can also be that something's coming up with a sibling or a neighbor or a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, and it could be that perhaps they're experiencing some sadness or disappointment in their life with the square to Neptune. Maybe they are, going through something, or maybe they disappoint you, or maybe you learn something about them that they were struggling with that you didn't know. That can be something that comes up as well with this full moon, Aries. Your tarot card for this one is the Two of Pentacles, meaning that there is an emphasis on being back and forth about some information, back and forth about a decision, back and forth about a path to take, a venture to take, whether to do it, whether to not, what you think, what you don't think, and sort of being in the process of deciding what that is. And I think under this full moon, you might get some clarity on what you're going to decide. That is what I have for you, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Taurus, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. Taurus, this full moon is happening in your 2nd house, which means for a lot of you, it is putting emphasis on your finances. It can be a case under this full moon that you are reconsidering your financial situation. Your financial situation may be changing. You might be becoming aware of money spent, money earned, for example, whether that's that you're getting a pay rise, or whether that is that you've your salary has changed, or you're receiving money for something that you've done in the past. I think for a lot of you, you've maybe been back and forth, Taurus, on your financial affairs, maybe reconsidering your mortgage or reconsidering your inheritance or maybe reconsidering your tax. You could have been back and forth discussing these things with somebody. You might not have been getting very far. It could have been confusing, could be insurance, could be tax, could be mortgages. There may have been some back and forth, some miscommunication, or just trouble understanding what the information was about for you. And under this full moon, you might be getting some clarity on maybe what money you owe or what money you're receiving, with this full moon being in Gemini, your second house. Now, there is a square to Neptune, which can suggest maybe there are some disappointments. Maybe you're disillusioned about this financial arrangement when it comes to the future, when it comes to how it impacts the future, or perhaps it's that you feel a little bit disillusioned or disappointed in a group. So say you're receiving money from a particular group or a particular organization or something of that nature. You could be a little bit disappointed and maybe reconsider your relationship to that group or organization. It can also be that perhaps for some of you, you may decide that you have been, maybe you haven't been making the most of your money, or maybe you have been, for want of a better word, squandering it on some things with the square to Neptune. Obviously that's not the case for all of you, but sometimes a Neptune square can mean that you've been a bit naive to where your money was going, or maybe a bit naive as to how much you were spending. It's financial blindness, I think, is the term, and it can happen to anybody. So it's just a case of maybe under this full moon you're thinking, oh well, actually, maybe spending my money on Beanie Babies every month isn't a wise decision. I don't know why that was the example that came to my head, but it did. So for some of you, I think you're reconsidering your spending habits or the money that you make, or it could be changing. It could also be with the square to Neptune that maybe there's been some hidden costs, or maybe there's been, something about it that you weren't totally aware of under this full moon. With Mercury now stationing direct, Mercury ruling your financial sector and being in your 8th house, I do think if it's to do with a mortgage or loan or joint financial matters, you're probably going to get a little bit more clarity on how that's going to affect you or how that's going to work going forward if it's been very unclear thus far. Your tarot card is the Knight of Pentacles, which makes a lot of sense. This is where you may be choosing to take a more careful, slow and steady approach to your financial situation in order to build something that is more solid and reliable. You may also be receiving financial news at the time of this full moon. That is what I have for you, Taurus, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Gemini, welcome to the full moon in your sign. So Gemini, it would make sense this week if you were feeling a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more emotional, a little bit more in touch with your feelings. And the main reason for that is the fact that this is a full moon in your 1st house of self. So it is making you more self-aware, more self-conscious. But there is also a square to Neptune, which can really heighten your sensitivity, whether that is to your own feelings, the feelings and the energies around you, what you're putting on your body, what you're putting in your body, what you're eating, what you're putting on your skin and your hair. You might just notice yourself being more sensitive in general, even to things like clothing. You might feel more sensitive. Now, the square to Neptune is an interesting one for you because it's in your 10th house of career, and you may be feeling a little bit disillusioned or disappointed, maybe at work, maybe with someone in a position of authority. You may feel a little bit as though at work people are avoiding you or trying to hide from you, especially if it's a boss or a mentor. Or you may just feel as though you're trying to get someone's attention and it's not working, because Neptune is a bit of an escape artist at worst. And Neptune can sometimes bring an energy of disillusionment where you feel disappointed in someone or something. And for you, it's the 10th house of the boss, authority figures, matters in your career, etc. So you could be feeling a bit disappointed or more sensitive to what's going on at work and how it's affecting you. Now, the good news about this, Gemini, is that Mercury, your ruling planet, and also the ruler of this full moon by default, is actually going to be stationing direct under this full moon. Now, I will say when Mercury stations, it can be a little bit initially like Mercury retrograde on steroids. You can notice that on the 15th itself, there's more room for miscommunication, more room for error, more room for confusion. That is true, but Mercury will be stationing direct. So after that, you'll start to feel clarity return and you'll feel more like yourself and communication will improve. Now, communication for you with Mercury being retrograde in your 7th house is to do with your relationships. So if there's been misunderstandings with a partner, if there's been a little bit of trouble communicating with a partner, with your relationship, within your relationship, or with a key relationship, that should start to subside. You may realize that they have been experiencing a bit of difficulty, maybe in their own professional life, or maybe with their own sense of self. They could have been feeling a little bit confused themselves, and it may have been affecting your relationship. This doesn't have to be a romantic one, but it can be. It just simply is that when you have a Mercury retrograde in your 7th house, past issues can come up in relationships, miscommunications can come up in relationships, etc., Gemini. So you should notice that start to improve from the full moon in your sign. But I do think for a lot of you, you could be feeling a little bit more altruistic and wanting to help others too, with the square to Neptune, wanting to help others around you, or maybe other people are wanting to help you in your private life. We do have the 6 of Pentacles, which is a card about helping those in times of need. So you may notice if you're feeling a little bit more sensitive, maybe you're wanting to help other people, or you find yourself receiving help from others too. That is what I have for you, Gemini, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Cancer, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. So Cancer, this full moon is happening in your 12th house. That might mean that under this full moon you're feeling a little bit more introverted, you need some time to retreat, you need some time alone, you need some space, because the 12th house is a very private and behind the scenes oriented house. It's where you want to work on something privately, do something secretly, operate in the shadows, so to speak. And it can also be a place of secrets. So with a full moon there, sometimes you learn something that you didn't know, and that can either be that you were avoiding finding out. It can be that you just simply didn't see it coming. It can be that you learn something or come into information that was not available to you before with this one. And it could be something that is maybe to do with your health or your work. So you might learn a secret about a colleague, about a work situation, about a work arrangement. You might learn a secret about your health, maybe that you weren't aware of. So you could come into information about your, health, a health matter that you've been back and forward on, maybe test results or something of that nature. I do feel with the square to Neptune, you could be a little bit disappointed or disillusioned with what this is. You could even feel a little bit deceived with a hard aspect to Neptune and the 12th house being involved. You could feel a little bit duped for whatever reason. So maybe you learn something about your work situation that you didn't know, or you find out that maybe someone at work was discussing you when you weren't there, or hid something from you, or you might learn something about your health that your doctor delayed in telling you or something of that nature, and you start to get clarity going forward. So if you have been involved in a back and forth situation medically, it can be a full moon that sort of resets it so that you start to get greater clarity on what actually is going on behind the scenes, what you need to know about your body, what you need to know about your health, what you need to do to be your best, or maybe even who you need to avoid when it comes to your work and career, or if you need to make a change with where you work or who you work with Mercury stationing in the 6th, or if you need to change your job or change your role or change your service or something of that nature, Cancer. You might get clarity on what you need to do there. And it can also be that maybe your role is changing and you weren't prepared for that, you didn't expect it, and you wish somebody had let you know sooner. With this full moon highlighting your 12th house, it does feel though that the information that comes to light may be information that you need, but it feels as though you might have had some lack of clarity on a health matter. It can also be a mental health matter with the 12th house being highlighted. But it is important under this full moon that you take care of yourself, you nurture yourself, you take your time to rest, you take your time to retreat, Cancer. Now your tarot card is the King of Cups. So this suggests to me that you may be consulting someone who is medical, someone who is maybe a healer, someone who is maybe quite emotionally mature, someone who wants to help, someone who wants to support. So you might encounter someone like this under the full moon, someone that wants to help you with what you need to know. It could be a doctor, it could be a healer, someone who's going to help you moving forward, Cancer. So that is what I have for you, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Leo, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. So Leo, this full moon is happening in your 11th house, and this is to do with friendships, this is to do with your social groups, your social networks. This is also to do with your hopes for the future, your aspirations, and in some cases your manifestations. So this full moon is highlighting that sector. There is a square to Neptune with this one. So there may be some potential under this full moon that you feel somewhat disappointed or disillusioned with a friend of yours or with a group or a team. Leo, you could be feeling a little bit disappointed. You may also find yourself trying to avoid a friend or a team, or they're avoiding you with the square to Neptune in your 8th house. It does feel with Neptune in 8th, there could be a tendency towards avoidance if there is a conflict or information coming to you. If there's been a misunderstanding with friendships or with groups or teams, you may be feeling a little bit more avoidant, or it may be triggering some avoidance within you, or you may be experiencing a bit of an uncomfortable energy towards someone else being avoidant in a group or a team, or being unavailable to you. You know, a friend being somewhat unavailable when you would like them to be there, or something of that nature. Now, the ruler of this full moon, Mercury, is transiting your 5th and is stationing that day. So if you've been a little bit back and forth about maybe someone that you're dating or someone that you're romantically involved with, after this full moon you'll start to get a bit more clarity and a little bit more certainty. Or if you've been trying to plan a reunion with friends or a get together with friends and plans have been cancelled and you've not been able to go to this event or that event, it might be easier to formalize plans and stick with them going forward as well. If you've been back and forth in a creative goal as well, I think this full moon is going to help you get back on track. I will mention the day of the full moon, Leo, with Mercury stationing, it's not really the day where things click, because when Mercury stations, oftentimes that means that we feel the effects of Mercury retrograde that little bit stronger. So I will say give it a couple of days before the clarity fully settles in and you're aware of what certain things mean, and you're not being influenced by maybe a psychological pattern or a past experience or somebody else who is perhaps a bit, for want of a better word, triggered. I just think Neptune in the 8th looks a little bit like for you, you're psychologically a bit triggered into avoiding something, or someone's avoiding you potentially with a friendship matter, a group, a team, or a future plan. And you could be feeling a little bit disillusioned with this, or even a little bit disappointed in them. But I do think for a lot of you, this may be something that is based on a misunderstanding or a miscommunication, and clarity might help resolve the matter later. Now, the 9 of Cups is your tarot card, which means wish fulfillment, Leo. So this is really positive. The 11th house is the house of wishes. Something might be coming true. I feel like it's something personal to you because it's the 9 of Cups, so something you want for yourself, something that you were hoping to get. Looks like you might be successful under this full moon, something that you really wanted on a personal level. That is what I have for you, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Virgo, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. Virgo, this full moon is happening in your 10th house of your career, your professional life, your public image. This also rules people in positions of authority in your life. So your boss, if you have one, or your role as a boss, if you are one. So this full moon highlighting this particular sector for you, it's bringing a lot of feelings to the surface when it comes to your career, when it comes to your public image, when it comes to your boss, or how you feel about being one. It's entirely possible under this full moon that you're feeling a little bit disillusioned or disappointed in certain workplace relationships. So maybe your relationship to your boss, or maybe your relationship to someone in the workplace in a position of authority, or someone that maybe is a client to you if you are a boss or self-employed, for example. You could be feeling a little bit disillusioned. Somebody could be a bit avoidant, or someone could be a bit, they could be doing a Houdini that is very disappointing to you at this time. So maybe they're not showing up for you in the way that you want them to, with Neptune being in the mix. Neptune's in your relationship sector, so it feels as though you feel that someone in your career, linked to your career, is avoiding you or is escaping you, or you want to escape them potentially. You want some space from them or something of that nature as well, Virgo. But I do think you could be feeling a little bit disillusioned or disappointed with career matters generally, and it seems to be coming from your relationships within that. So maybe it's how many clients you have, or maybe it's how present your boss is, you know, whether they're a micromanager or just completely hard to reach, whatever the case may be, with Neptune being there. It also feels, Virgo, with your ruler stationing the day of this full moon, that you could just be feeling a little bit like you need some downtime to rest, because you're almost recalibrating to the energy. Mercury is going to be stationing in your 4th house, so your misunderstandings and your miscommunication could have been coming in the workplace, but they could also have been coming in your home and your family, with people you consider family. There could have been miscommunication there. People could have said things, you could have said things, and it could have been hard to understand each other. Mercury stationing means this is going to clear up, which is positive. But it may take a few days after the full moon before you really notice this. I do think for a lot of you there could be squabbling in your life at the moment, because we have the 5 of Wands as your tarot card, which is where you feel like people have your backup. They're arguing with you, they're nitpicking with you, they're challenging you, or they're competing with you. And I think you could be feeling a bit frustrated with other people generally under this full moon, thanks to that Neptune square from your 7th house. It will pass. Do allow yourself to feel whatever feelings are coming up, because as one of the mutable signs, you may be more sensitive, but the fog is actually lifting. And as Mercury goes direct, you're going to feel more and more like yourself as we move past this full moon. That's what I have for you, Virgo, and I will talk to you soon. Hi Libra, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. Libra, this full moon is happening in your 9th house, so it's really putting a spotlight on traveling. It's putting a spotlight on your belief systems, your higher beliefs. It could be your higher education, and it could be to do with foreign relationships in general. So maybe people that live at a long distance to you that are in your life, or people that you go to university with, or even your teachers or your mentors may come under this full moon. So you might have something going on in any of these themes. Now, what it looks like for you is that maybe for some of you it is traveling, maybe for some of you it is getting a documentation pertaining to traveling, like getting your passport renewed or getting a visa or something like that, especially if there has been a lot of back and forth with this particular type of thing. The reason for that is that your 9th house is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury has been retrograde. So the day of this full moon, Mercury is actually stationing. So it feels like when we get past this full moon, there might be some clarity pertaining to these documents. Maybe you've renewed your passport and it's taken a while to arrive. Maybe you have been waiting to get something approved. A lot of it could be happening under this full moon. And for some of you, it could simply be that you're taking a vacation, traveling, or you're getting some sort of exam results. Maybe you're getting a degree or a master's degree or something of that nature. Particularly masters, as I believe a lot of people do, a lot of winter graduations happen in December. So it could be that you're maybe graduating or getting some sort of certificate or certification under this full moon. For others of you, it's simply to do with your belief systems, and you might be more interested in topics of philosophy or faith at this time. For some of you, where the full moon is less impactful, it can be something as simple as reading a book on faith, listening to a podcast on a particular religion or a particular belief system, and really broadening your mind to what is possible. Now, there's a square to Neptune, so some of you could be feeling slightly disillusioned or disappointed with these matters. Maybe some of you are having to graduate, but you're not feeling 100% yourself with Neptune going through your 6th house squaring this full moon. Maybe there are some work or practical matters that are frustrating you or disappointing you. It could be that for some of you, you're having a challenging time with people in the workplace. It can be that co-workers or colleagues or employees, you feel maybe a little bit suspicious that they're being evasive or avoidant at this time, or they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes in some way, shape or form, Libra. It doesn't have to be that case. For some of you, it could just be that you're feeling a little under the weather with a cold or something of that nature. Now, with Mercury stationing direct in your 3rd house, it feels that going forward, communication is going to improve for you generally. It's not going to be as likely that you'll put your foot in your mouth, or you're going to have trouble making a speech or something of that nature, Libra. It could have been that recently you've had trouble communicating or trouble making a statement, or just you've found it harder to speak to people more generally, because sometimes it can just mess up the way that you speak when Mercury is retrograde in your third house. The square to Neptune may also mean that you could potentially want to be taking some time off work or getting away from work to travel, to take some time out and to relax, Libra, because maybe you're feeling a little bit, as I say, under the weather, burnt out, or you just feel like you're not so focused on your work responsibilities with this square from Neptune. And interestingly, your tarot card, Libra, was the Three of Pentacles, which means that in the workplace, there may be a lot going on. It could be quite busy. You know, we have Saturn in this ongoing square to the Mercury retrograde. So you may be finding it quite challenging to communicate at work or at you could be finding it quite hard to communicate at work, or it could be very busy, and you might find under this full moon you just need to take a break. That's what I have for you, Libra, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Scorpio, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. Scorpio, this full moon is happening in your 8th house, and this is to do with merging with other people. This is where you're connected to other people on an intimate level or a financial level. So it can be highlighting these type of matters, you know, whether that is taxes, whether that is your spouse's money, your partner's income, whether it is your mortgage, wherever you're joined financially with someone else, or even intimately, an intimate relationship can fall under this full moon. So your emotions can be running high when it comes to these particular themes. Now, the 8th house is a very psychological house. You know it well. It is your house. But with your full moon in the 8th house, your annual full moon in the 8th house, you could be feeling a little bit more, I don't necessarily want to use the word triggered because it gets used a lot, and I need to whip out the thesaurus and find an alternative. But it could be where you're feeling a little bit emotionally more vulnerable, a little bit more emotionally edgy, experiencing some psychological sunburn. And that can be where someone inadvertently triggers some wounding within you. Now, this could be a romantic partner, it could be someone that you're dating, thanks to the square to Neptune, or it can even be that your own children can trigger you on a psychological level in some way, shape, or form, or you're really feeling this creative frustration where you want to put your art and your creativity into a new way of expressing yourself emotionally, but you're finding it hard, or you're finding it to be a little bit trickier than you thought. So for a lot of Scorpios, I think this full moon could be quite an emotional one. It's a great one for doing shadow work. If you can be honest with yourself, the square to Neptune can make us a little bit more self-deceptive or prone to deception from other people around us. But you may find it easier to get lost in something creative or something artistic as a way of coping with your emotions, Scorpio. With Mercury ruling this full moon and stationing direct in the same day, you may find when it comes to money matters in general, whether they're linked to somebody else or whether they're your own, you may find that it's easier to think straight, it's easier to get clarity on your financial affairs, and it's easier to make better choices when it comes to spending. So if you have been putting off your Christmas shopping until after this full moon, that's not a bad idea, because you might have recently purchased something that you think, actually, I'm not so sure I need this, you know, under the full moon. Or it could be that your partner is saying, we absolutely do not need the third toaster in the kitchen. That kind of conversation could be coming up for you under this full moon as well. But it seems under this full moon you could be feeling a little bit more emotionally vulnerable and a little bit raw at times. And your tarot card was actually the moon, Scorpio, which is very appropriate for a full moon, I think. But the moon is where we can feel a bit anxious, we can feel a bit confused, matters going on around us can feel a bit elusive, which is very like this full moon. But it can also be where we feel that through our dreams or through our sleep, we're waking up and we're becoming more conscious of something that was going on underneath the surface. You know, dreams can bring attention to what we're actually working through subconsciously, and maybe for you some things are coming to the surface, and maybe some things are coming to the surface in terms of fears or past wounding that you may be addressing under this full moon. The 8th house is the house of transformation, so have faith in yourself that anything that does come up, you can deal with it, you can process it, and you can transform it in some way, Scorpio. So if you're feeling very intense emotions under this full moon, it will pass, and you may actually get clarity on a matter that has been bugging you for some time. That's what I have for you, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Sagittarius, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. So Sagittarius, this full moon is actually highlighting your relationship sector, and you're going to be relieved with this full moon for yourself personally, because Mercury, the ruler of this full moon, is stationing direct on the same day as this full moon. Mercury is stationing direct in your first house in your sign, so you may find that after this full moon passes, things are just generally making a little bit more sense for you, and you're not feeling so confused about what you want, what you need, what you think, etc. But this full moon is bringing attention to your partnerships and your relationships in your life. And those don't have to be romantic relationships. If you're single, it can, though, even if you're single, it can bring attention to what you want emotionally when it comes to your partnership or a relationship, or it can help you work through some relationship wounding from the past as well, particularly because there's a Mercury station at the time of this full moon. So the way that this can work out for you, Sagittarius, is that it can bring attention to your relationship sector generally and how you relate to other people. There is a square to Neptune, which means that other people may be more prone to disappointing you at this time, deceiving you at this time, and that does not have to be in an extreme sense. It can sometimes be where someone has been trying to spare your feelings by not telling you that they actually really hate that clock that you've put on the mantelpiece or something of that nature. It doesn't have to be huge, but it can be that you feel a little bit like maybe someone in your family or someone that you live with was trying to avoid you, or maybe not telling you about something that you think they should have told you about. Maybe they were not telling you that they were actually planning to move, or maybe they were not telling you that they were going through something. Whatever the case may be, you may feel a little bit disappointed or confused as to why they didn't share something with you. And this could be, as I say, someone that you live with, Sagittarius, or it could be to do with your living situation, landlords or things like that. But it is putting a spotlight on your relationships more generally. And if you have been disappointed in the past by a partner, this can be a time where you're perhaps processing this. It can also be a time for some of you where you are maybe making a relationship official, maybe you're getting into a relationship, maybe you're realizing how you feel about someone that you're very close to in your life. And this may be something that you've been back and forth on, Sagittarius, because with Mercury ruling your 7th house and being retrograde in your 1st, maybe you've been kind of confused about somebody in your life, a relationship of sorts, and you've been thinking, I don't know if I do trust this person, or I don't know if I want to be with this person, and maybe you've been back and forth on it. And under this full moon, as it passes in the days that follow, you maybe get a little bit more clarity on whoever this person is. And it could also be getting clarity on what you want from a relationship in the future, and where you could maybe be a little bit more realistic about the type of partners that you choose. The thing about the square to Neptune is that it can be where, yes, we're deceived by other people, but in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases that involves some degree of self-deception. Or it can also be forgiving yourself for where you acted in a way that you regret in the past as well, Sagittarius. A lot of people are actually working through that with Mars retrograde, getting past our regrets when it comes to our past actions. And actually having regrets can be quite healthy because it shows that you've grown as a person and you've developed as a person, Sagittarius. Now, your tarot card was the 7 of Wands, which is to do with a bit of struggle, a bit of competition, defending something. You may be feeling a little bit more defensive under this full moon, or you may feel a little bit like others have challenged you when it comes to your thoughts, and maybe it's been harder for you to articulate what you think and what you feel. And maybe you've had some communication blunders with other people that have gotten, each other's backs up, and under this full moon that will start to pass and people will start to patch things up and make up as time goes on. That's what I have for you, Sagittarius, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Capricorn, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. Capricorn, this is putting a highlight on your work. So this is happening in your 6th house, which can shine a spotlight on your workplace. There could be something significant happening for you at your job, in your place of employment. It could be that someone is leaving the place that you work, a colleague is leaving, an employee is leaving, there are changes in your role or something of that nature. It can be that maybe there's some sort of announcement going on at work for you, Capricorn. And this could be something that's quite confusing, or you could be a bit confused about the process. And maybe for some of you, it's simply tech trouble, because there's a square to Neptune in your 3rd, which is adding a bit of confusion when it comes to your work, when it comes to the people that you're working with or what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You may find that some of the technology that you use at work is not working that well, especially on the day of this full moon. If you happen to work on a Sunday, it can be a case that maybe there's confusion about what you're being asked, confusion in a team or something of that nature. Now, for some of you, it's nothing to do with work. It can be to do with your health and your wellness under this full moon. For some of you, this can bring up conversations of medication. I often find, particularly if you have a Neptune transit to your personal placement, but whenever we have a full moon that has, the 6th house and Neptune involved, it can bring up conversations about medication or treatments. And you may be feeling a little bit confused about what is going on with your health plan if you have one, or you may be finding that you're not so pleased with whatever health plan that you've been on, and you're maybe wanting to make changes under this full moon. You know, you might realize that you're allergic to something that you've been using generally, you know, a skin cream or a shampoo. It can be a case that maybe you realize that's something you no longer have a tolerance for. That sometimes happens with foods or even things that we use aesthetically. I know that a lot of people found that after the pandemic, they couldn't use nail polish anymore after using it for years. And then whenever they went off it, they couldn't get back on it, which is really interesting. But it just goes to show that sometimes time off something can change your tolerance to it, or it can make you realize that it's actually not something you can use anymore. So perhaps for some of you, there's a conversation going on about whether something is actually acting as an irritant to your health going forward, or whether you feel like treatment that you have is maybe no longer working for you. It may be that you're talking to a doctor under this full moon. For some of you, you're getting some sort of health results. Bear in mind, there could be some confusion about it. Mercury's been retrograde. There's a Neptune square. So if you have to ask for clarity, you might find that in the days after the full moon, and as we get further on into December, things become a bit more clear and a little less confusing when it comes to treatment, when it comes to health, and when it comes to wellness, Capricorn. Your tarot card was the Knight of Swords. It feels like you're maybe wanting to rush something, or you're wanting to pick up the pace, or you feel like things are quite busy. You feel like the pace is picking up, and maybe you're finding at work things are very busy and you feel like you just can't escape and get a moment to think. You just can't get a moment for yourself. And under this full moon, maybe you're wanting to rush something or get something done so that you can enjoy something else. You know, maybe you're wanting to get away from your phone, your emails, etc. So you're making a dash for it, Capricorn. That's what I have for you, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Aquarius, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. So Aquarius, this full moon is happening in your natal 5th house. And this is bringing attention to fun, romance, creativity. It's also bringing your attention to your children or pregnancy, matters like that. So some of you could find out that you're pregnant under this full moon. Full moons in the 5th oftentimes bring that about. Some of you could be giving birth around the time of this full moon. But it can be that even if it's not to do with a pregnancy or birth, it can be to do with your own children in your life, and a significant event might be coming up with them, Aquarius. I want to say when it comes to matters of children, there is a square to Neptune, which means you could be feeling a little bit, disappointed in something that they do or that they say at this time, or something that they've negated to tell you. And it could be to do with money. They could have needed, it can be one of those situations where they have a project due the next day and they tell you at 10 o'clock at night or something like that. It doesn't ever have to be a huge deal, but it could be that you're feeling a bit disillusioned or disappointed in something to do with a child. But it can also be that you're maybe realizing that something is going to cost a little bit more than you thought it would when it comes to a child, or when it comes to something to do with a pregnancy perhaps. The square to Neptune in your 2nd means that you could be a little bit disillusioned with how much something is costing or how much you have to pay for something. And it can also be under this full moon that it's bringing a spotlight to matters of dating, romance, those type of things. And it could be at this time that maybe you're just lacking a little bit of confidence with that square to Neptune in the 2nd house. Maybe you're feeling a bit disillusioned with the idea of love, a bit disillusioned with someone that you're dating, or maybe you're just feeling a little bit insecure or not quite yourself. Neptune as a square from the 2nd can mean that you're not feeling so confident under this full moon. Even if you're at a party, even if you're having a good time, you could just be feeling a little bit more self-conscious, or maybe just a little bit more disillusioned, as I say, with financial matters. Now, for some of you, it can also be to do with creativity. It can be that you're wanting to work on something artistically, but again, you could be feeling a little bit of a lack of confidence at times, Aquarius. It can also be for a lot of you, as this is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is stationing the day of this full moon in Sagittarius, your 11th house. If there have been misunderstandings with friends, or if there have been communication issues with groups and people that you're networking with or socializing with, this full moon can be a time when you realize things are going to get back on track. Mercury stationing can sometimes amplify the effects of Mercury retrograde the day of, but you may find going forward that misunderstandings in groups or with teams, or miscommunication with friends or fallouts with friends can sort of, maybe you get everything out into the air, all the feelings out into the air, and then things start to make sense later. And you start to realize, oh, actually there wasn't a problem at all. I don't know where that came from. With your miscommunication with Mercury stationing direct. So under this full moon, essentially it could be a case where maybe some of you are going to a party or an event where there is a friend there that you'd had a miscommunication with, and you find out under this full moon it was actually a complete misunderstanding or something of that nature. Or you may have had misunderstandings when it comes to future plans with your children. Maybe they didn't realize the arrangements, or maybe it is that you didn't realize that something was going to cost as much as it actually does under this full moon, Aquarius. But nevertheless, it does have this lovely full moon in the fifth house effect, whereby you might be out having a good time. You might have more invitations to go to a party, to a social event. Maybe for some of you it's to do with children, so it could be your kids' pantomime, or it could be a play that they're in for the holiday season, or something of that nature. Your tarot card, Aquarius, was the Emperor, which means that Aries, Sun, Moon and Rising people can be a big part of your full moon experience, but it can also be that there's something maybe coming up with a boss, a father figure, or a mentor under this full moon. And maybe with this full moon shining a spotlight on romantic matters, for those of you who are single, you might meet someone who's older, or you might meet someone who is an Aries, Sun, Moon or Rising, someone self-employed, someone successful, etc. That's what I have for you, Aquarius, and I'll talk to you soon. Hi Pisces, welcome to the full moon in Gemini for your sign. So Pisces, this full moon is happening in your fourth house of home, family, living situation, property matters, etc. And it is ruled by Mercury, which is stationing the day of this full moon. Now, the one thing about the Mercury station is that, yes, Mercury going direct will bring more clarity, but it might take a couple of days to come in, because the day of the station is oftentimes a bit more... It amplifies the themes of Mercury retrograde, I find. So the day of a Mercury station, even if it's stationing direct, can sometimes bring about the most technological errors, confusion, missing a text, missing an email, that kind of thing. So just be mindful of that the day of the full moon. Clarity might take a little bit more time to come in. But with this full moon highlighting your home and family sector, you could have, peak emotions when it comes to your living situation or your relationship to your family or a family member. There might be something highlighted within the home or family that is potentially a little bit disappointing with the square to Neptune, or you may have to disappoint someone within your home or within your family a little bit, because the square to Neptune is happening in your first house. So you could be feeling disappointed, but also you could have to disappoint somebody. Or it could be that you're just feeling a little bit disillusioned about your living situation or your home arrangement, or a little bit disillusioned with a family dynamic. You may feel more sensitive and more emotional to whatever is happening in the home. So make sure that, you're airing out a stuffy bedroom, you're keeping your space clean, you're keeping the energy good, because you're more susceptible to whatever energies are within the home at this particular point. Now, Mercury is stationing that day, as I said, it's stationing in your 10th. So if you've been a little bit unclear about what is happening with a work situation, what is happening going forward with a work situation, it feels that you may get some clarity within the days that follow, because as they say, the day of Mercury station isn't always the easiest to get that clarity, but it feels that clarity might be coming in surrounding a work situation. And this may in some way assist in changing your living arrangement. So whether that is that you're maybe deciding to look for a job in a different state, a different country, or you're looking to work somewhere that has a different hybrid model. So maybe you'll work from home more, maybe you'll work from home less. Some of you could be deciding that you want to make job changes in the future, and you might have got clarity from this Mercury retrograde, and it could potentially impact your living situation going forward. Your tarot card, Pisces, is the Knight of Cups. So I think for a lot of you, you could be feeling a little bit more emotional, a little bit more creative. You may be a little bit more of a homebody under this full moon, but with the Knight of Cups, you may be wearing your heart on your sleeve and wanting to foster more emotionally supportive connections with others. You may also be expressing your emotions to someone else, or someone may be expressing their emotions to you. Someone might be making a gesture to you under this full moon as well. That's what I have for you, Pisces, and I'll talk to you soon.